So I think it's only kind of appropriate we follow the discussion recently about kind of the future of mobile games, the future of funding, with a look at the Asian market. It's only appropriate we follow one of the board members of Supercell with a look at the Asian market. Because obviously kind of China especially is very relevant to the GMIC with its roots there. But this week's news, particularly with the Galloway SoftBank investment in Supercell, shows that the Asian markets aren't really the future anymore of the industry, they're kind of the present. So I've got a distinguished panel here to discuss kind of trends in those markets, how Western countries think going there, and what Eastern countries think going to the West. But before we kick off, I'm going to whip through really quickly just a few slides I put together. I like slides. So this is a little bit of research on the internet, so some of it is probably 9% true. So basically, let's get a little profiles of each of the countries in the market to show where we are. This is South Korea. It's just dropped kind of $1 billion in value in 2030, which I think is possibly a bit conservative, but they're a cultural organisation, so who am I to say? 50 million population, massive smartphone penetration, massive phone penetration, a lot of the smartphone users playing games. The graphic from Flo was part of the report saying that Korea has actually become the most evolved and closest to being saturated market yet. So it's quite an interesting case to look at what's happening there, what will happen there, because they've not got this massive growth of phones to come in the way that the market's going to have. What we are seeing there, some data from SKT, still SK Telecom report, where they were getting incredibly high sort of ARPUs there of $5.27 per user, which is kind of roughly twice what I think people expect in the US. And obviously, we'll definitely talk about this, it's already mentioned already. The likes of KakaoTalk and Line are having a huge impact on the market there at the moment. So moving on to China. Obviously, the market value, just impossible to find any group that agrees even faintly on it. Just the figures vary so widely all over the place, but it's we had 1.2 billion from a couple of reports, another report saying about $820 million have been sort of turned over in the first half already. Demographics obviously is massive. The smartphone install rate base was already 300 million at the start of this year, expected to be 500 million by the end of the year. Those figures about Android similar, I think, are quite dated. It's hard to find precise information because there's so many different suppliers, but clearly it's going to be more and more Androids as we progress. The kind of key points that looking through the research reports about it were, again, WeChat, social networking that's coming is likely to represent a big chunk of the market, where KakaoTalk and Line have in Korea. And obviously it's a massive industry. There's over 80,000 developers making games at the moment, so that's pretty staggering to think about. And last but by no means least, the biggest market currently is Japan. Mobile games have been big business there for a long time. They kind of managed to make the feature phone model work in a way that no one else really did. So the smartphone penetration is low there, because people kind of love to touch their what we call feature phones. And you can see that there's a real transition happening at the moment between the kind of the feature phones, which represented about half of the revenue last year, and the smartphone revenue, which is slightly higher. And clearly that's going to continue. As part of that, you've seen companies like Green, who own the power, kind of becoming less influential in a long way, and Gung Ho and other companies kind of coming through. So, a few very quick slides about just to show the influence of this Asian markets. This is from iOS and Google Play top 10s for August. Shows that 7 of the 10 are through Google Play. The top 7 games internationally were from Asian markets. And if you look at iOS, that's kind of 2.5 if you include half of Supercell now. And the same is pretty true of the publishers there, with seven publishers in the top 10 from August hailing from Japan and Korea, and 4.5 if you include half Supercell from iOS. And again, just to show, this is a report from Gistmo speaking later that they do with Newzoo. This influence goes even deeper. We went back in March, it was like 15 of the top 20 revenue-earning businesses in global Google Play market were from Korea, Japan, or China. And kind of final 2 points. M&A recently, obviously, this is the biggest year of M&A, I think, for games for some time. They say it's the top 5 billion already. The majority of that money is coming through is coming from Asia. You've seen the big investment of SoftBank and Galloway and Supercell. We saw Gameville all come to us. Q unfortunately couldn't be here, was going to be here. And the investment to China, laser company Chukong, which raised 50 million next. Is that this week? Last week? Today?
Yes.
Last week? That's all. Okay. We'll also talk about who's next. Obviously there's a lot more to Asia than just Japan, Korea, and China. So you can see from those graphs, some of the fastest growing markets in the world are also in the Asian space. So that's my very quick intro. Just give you some facts and figures. So now I'm going to throw this over to the panel. And what I'm going to kind of ask is if you can just do a very quick introduction to yourself and explain kind of which of those markets, which of the Asian markets you engage with. And basically, and also maybe highlight what you think is the most important trend in those markets currently. So, okay, is you Lei first?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zhang. I'm the general manager of Chukong, and also known as Coco China. We are a leading mobile game developer and publisher in the China market, and also we have a global presence. We have a publishing arm in the US and also in Taiwan and Korea. I think that's the very unique position of us. We do know different markets, and we know the game's performance in different markets. I think that helps us to monetize games better in our home country, China. We're publishing on behalf of some of the leading developers worldwide, including Disney Mobile, Konami, Nexon Mobile, GameLoft, etc.
Hi, my name is Thomas Lee. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Wemo Lab. I'm actually sitting in on behalf of Hugh Lee. I was a token Korean apparently in the room, so here I am. I'll share my limited knowledge that I have in games for close to 2 decades now, and so I think there's a lot of similarities, as Christian pointed out earlier, not only in free-to-play, but the penetration and the translation into the mobile, what we've seen in typical free-to-play games that were successful many times. I'll share a bit about Korea.
I'm Josh Galloway. I'm not actually the co-founder and EVP of iDreamSky. I've been an advisor since 2011. I'm actually very good friends with Jeff Linden. We've been working together on and off since maybe 2001. He asked me to join as an advisor when I left Turner Broadcasting in 2011. And I kind of bring to them experience and network kind of outside of China. They're a very Chinese-focused company. They're a leading smartphone game publisher. They publish Fruit Ninja, Temple Run 2, and a number of other games.
I'm Rick Liu, and I'm with NativeX. I'm responsible for Asia Pacific and Latin America. NativeX is a advertising platform that serves 6 out of the top 10 grossing apps. And my focus is on Asia Pacific, covering China and Japan. Previously, I was with DNA for the past 3 years.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much for that quick intro. So the first question I have is, I'm a kind of a relatively successful publisher in the West. I'm kind of focused on the US, European markets today. If I'm wanting to try and break into China, Korea, Japan, what's the kind of 1 or 2 bits of essential information or advice you kind of give me before I kind of start out?
I think I'll start. First of all, I think it's a surprise to have this kind of turnout. Especially this topic is about Asian market, foreign market, and usually the topic about that kind of markets, foreign markets, the turnout is pretty bad. And also considering there's a competition across the street from Apple event, so this is great. I think the interest about Asian market is definitely increasing. So for China market, the reason why you need a publisher or publishing partner, there are several folds. So first of all, it's the fragmentation. I guess before that, the key message from the China market is there's real revenue to be generated from that market. Across our portfolio, there are 5 games across the $1 million monthly revenue. So it's a common stereotype that there's only download, there's no revenue to be made in China, but that's not true. And secondly, that's mainly from Android. And then that comes to the first pain point is the fragmentation of app stores. So there are 200 plus app distribution channels, ranging from third-party app stores to carrier app stores to pre-install and so on. So, and each of them will not exceed a 15% of the market share. So to deal with these many app stores, you do have to have some local knowledge or expertise, or you better have a ground truth there. So that's the reason why you need a publisher. And also, secondly, is the payment system. So there's no Google Play, and App Store again, it's probably account for a smaller portion of the market of the revenue in China anyway. So to integrate with the local payment systems, including carrier billing, including Alipay, etc., you need to have some local know-how and a local partner. So publisher to enter the China market is a must.
So despite what Christian was saying earlier about the kind of role of the publisher from an international perspective, that's you know whatever you call that service, that local presence is essential for China.
Yeah, I would say the service provided by a local partner are several areas aspects. So first is localization, to really understand your game and also understand how the game is supposed to connect with the local players. In terms of the game content, so the localization is not limited to language only, but also the monetization and where to set the paywall, etc. And secondly, as I described earlier, is distribution and monetization and the payment.
Thomas, what do you, from a career perspective? I know you're a late draft, so I won't put too much pressure on, but...
Well, I'll share what I've heard and what I've experienced. So I think it's very different than China in that respect. So part of that is penetration. So if you want to go to Korea, you must be on Kakao, right? It's pretty much a given. But that said, doesn't mean that guarantees distribution and success. I think you also need to spend quite a bit of marketing dollars to actually get your game on top 10. And then I think the biggest difference will be, I mean, there are lots of different options in Korea, but two of the biggest ones that I'll share is between Line and Kakao. And I think using my experience, again, in the PC side, free-to-play games, I think ultimately the difference will be in not only the penetration and user base per se, but I think biggest difference between Line and Kakao is Line actually will take a lion's share of the pie, but they'll actually have project managers and producers attached to your product. So rather than just saying, okay, give us your game and we'll just push it, but rather they'll ask you to change, culturalize, and figure the content so that it's localized and culturalized to have a better success. So moving forward, I think you'll see a lot more sort of games as a service oriented platforms. So these are all, whether it's WeChat, Kakao, or Line. We're talking about platforms that we're going to ride on. Right? So I think that's probably the biggest difference.
Okay. And Rick, do you have anything to add from you obviously, I'll skip back to Josh in a second, but from coming a bit more from a Japanese perspective, ex-Dino and stuff, do you have anything to...
Sure. I think one thing that I'd like to add in addition to what guest has mentioned about is I think it is important to hire a permanent one-person team or two-person team within your company that is familiar with the particular target market that you're trying to get into. The reason is because there are just a lot of things that you need to get it done. It is good to have a partner, but having a partner is not the same as someone who's on your payroll. So having someone on your payroll has that extra availability and the allegiance to your causes. So it doesn't dilute any other conflicts to any other partners that this particular partner's may have.
It's a good pitch for your job there as well. That's so, Josh, do you have anything to add on that? You don't have to, but is there anything to from your experience that because obviously you're helping, the same with Lei, you're helping kind of Western companies come to China.
Yeah, I say very much like Chukong, like in China, it's kind of games as a service. So iDreamSky focuses a lot on building a relationship of trust with developers that they work with. And for people who see China as a territory where there's generally a lack of respect for IP, or it's impossible to build a relationship of trust with a Chinese partner, those type of developers probably won't have a lot of success finding a partner in the China market. I think it is possible. I've been in Asia for 13 years and had some really great partnerships, and have seen iDreamSky build some really valuable relationships with people like Halfbrick and Imanji. One of the key things for iDreamSky is we focus now only on partners who we can build that relationship of trust with, and who will hand over the source code of their games to us to completely manage the culturalization for the China market. And that includes everything from not just marketing and distribution, but changing the monetization loop, establishing the paywall, localizing the game. Some of the latest examples, we've been able to create completely new gameplay modes for games like, for Ninja, gameplay modes and features, which will only be seen initially in the China market for specific platforms.
Okay, all right. So flipping around a second, obviously Chukong and are international publishers. You've got very successful games in the Asian market. You've got Mission Joy, obviously, is massive. In terms of coming from that side, so I know we've got a lot of kind of Asian sort of business and guests here. Coming it back into the US and Europe, do you find like it's the same issue basically, that you need a team on the ground, that you need to understand the different relationships here, or is it a lot simpler going this way, going east to west rather than west to east?
Yeah, we are also a publisher bringing top Chinese games into the Western market. We tried at least, but we didn't have much success with our flagship game, Fishing Joy, at all, frankly speaking. But we do have some other titles that had relatively good performance in the Western market, including Contra. It's a classic retro gun run title by Konami Shanghai Studio that we're publishing on behalf of the international market. So with that experience, we sort of understood that, so first of all, as Chris pointed out, that the market condition here is much simpler. So there are just two stores to deal with mostly. It's Google Play, or three, Google Play and Apple App Store and Amazon. And the payment, you don't need to worry about integration with the payment system. So in that sense, it's much simpler. But on the other hand, the competition is much stiff in terms of product quality. So there are products that do have a global appeal, such as Contra, because it has this game has a following from the way back when. But there are titles that do perform really well worldwide. One example is Clash of Clans. But on the other hand, there are games that are performing really well in China or in the Asian market, especially the ones that with the Three Kingdoms or Sunbow scene that no one know about that part of the history of China. So definitely there's a culture barrier of certain games and certain genre that for games is pretty hard to across. But in general, it's the casual to mid-core games that potentially can have a more global appeal. That is in our opinion.
That sort of segues into the next sort of areas I'm going to look at really, whether the importance of kind of cultural differences and whether we under kind of rate that, because there have been a few breakout successes. Candy Crush is big, where Clash of Clans has been big. A few games have kind of delivered, done well, but ultimately. If you look at the charts, usually these territories, it is often local games that dominate and the games that don't go across. So I guess my question is it really viable to be thinking about global game strategy at all, or is that that just going to be for a very small percentage of games that can kind of achieve that? So going forward, is there a global games secret, and what would it look like, a global game? It's a lot of questions in there, so I don't know. Who wants to answer that? Go on, Rick, you're reaching for the mic.
I don't think there's the holy grail of having one game which is going to serve the global market just by reskinning and just by localizing the language in itself. The reason is because gameplay has quite a bit of attachment towards a person's language and culture and what they're being used to growing up in the educational system. So I think in terms of taking a game from a global perspective, you still need to have about 20 to 30% of a certain amount of localization that needs to be done just beyond the language in itself. But it has to do with the gameplay mechanics itself that will adapt to the particular target market.
Okay. Any addition to that?
Yeah, let's take a stab at it from sort of the content side. So I think I agree partly with what you said. Also, I think it's culturally, I mean, if you don't know, I'll use an example of the latest acquisition by Tencent. So I think they're doing something really interesting where you create a game based on gods, and they're Western gods for the Western market, right? So you take Zeus and Thor, and then you take that to China. Well, they don't know who Zeus and Thor are. However, from get-go, from the blueprint, they're actually designing it for the Chinese sort of gods and goddesses. So making it not just local, but making it culturally local. I think that translates. And then the second thing is you take a sport game like NBA 2K or something like that. So where basketball is really popular in China, so Tencent might be able to leverage that into the gaming space, right? So it's culture as well as content consumption, especially related to gaming, right? Because you may not understand the mechanics.
Okay. I have one more question, and I'll give people a chance to ask a question. A lot has been said before, and we'll say today about Line and KakaoTalk and WeChat. But obviously, these are great discovery mechanisms, and they're driving boosts in the market. But is there a danger that these new kind of networks are actually also sucking more money out of the system? Because obviously, you're still having to pay 30% to Apple and Google, and now you're having to pay a percentage to Line, KakaoTalk, and WeChat. So, is there a negative side, do you think, to these networks?
I think China and WeChat will be different, at least on the Android side, because WeChat itself is a distribution channel, so it will only take 30%. There will be no additional 30%. It's not direct traffic to Google Play or iPad App Store. iOS, yes, but iOS accounts for only a small portion of the revenue for any developers in China. So WeChat definitely is a platform that if you consider China, you should pay close attention to. But I think there are two key catches. So one is most of the games that we see on Kakao or Line now on WeChat will typically have a very short life cycle. It will be on the top of the chart for a few weeks and probably a couple months at the most, and then it will go down. So that in terms of the overall ROI of your investment, that's something that you need to put into the equation. And the second key point about WeChat is time will tell. It's not yet clear whether WeChat will become an open platform or not. Open, I mean, will that be open to any developers to self-service upload their games to their platform, or this will be a pure publishing model, meaning they will select games either have some kind of a strategic relationship with WeChat or Tencent, or self-publish games. So right now what we've learned is most of the games are either self-developed by Tencent team, or with some very, very well-known international developers, I think through local partners such as iDreamSky and us. So it's not quite clear whether WeChat will become a global platform or not.
Okay. Do you have any views on the KakaoTalk?
Just some basic things that everybody might know. So everybody probably knows that on top of 30% that Google and Apple will take. And by the way, in order to be on Kakao, you have to have both ready, not just one or the other.
Yeah.
And then secondly, Kakao on top of that will take a 30% of the net. So there's that sort of evil kind of, I think Christian mentioned earlier, there's a sort of strategic model where you're kind of giving away a big piece of the pie. But that said, Kakao's kind of what Cyworld used to be, where Facebook is, where everyone sort of has a smartphone and they all have Kakao on it. So, you just need to decide if that's what you're going to sort of decide.
Okay. John?
My recommendation to the game developers is to pursue a multi-channel distribution strategy and not to rely on just one source. From that perspective, you can arbitrage the different sources with the different percentages with the goal to achieve a profitable business.
Okay, very sensible. Okay, we're coming a bit of time back. We've probably got time for just one or two questions, or if anyone's got a question for this panel about how you put the game to Asia. Come on, there's one on there. Got a mic? Got any mic?
I have a loud voice.
You got a loud voice? Yes. That's good. So have I. Woo, go on then.
In terms of distribution,
distribution models and pricing in China. What are you seeing in terms of CPC versus CPI across the different channels?
Did you get that?
Yeah, usually it's a CPC based. First of all, the ads ad network on Android side is not that effective, mainly because of the fragmentation of stores. So you cannot cross promote an app from 360 to 91, from UC to Baidu, for instance. The stores will not allow you to sometimes even embed any ad network in your game. So for the Android side, usually the most effective marketing mechanism is to get store feature through a business relationship with different stores. And considering so many stores, 200 channels, then it's why it's essential to have a publisher work. But there are CPI data from the China market. So on the iOS side, it's pretty much similar to what we see here. It would be $1.5 to $5, depending on the genre and US dollar. And for Android, it's about 1/4 of that number.
Cool. Anyone want to ask a question? Do you need a mic?
Well, I can speak up.
You can speak up.
So
it's a small room. You speak.
So you guys talked about you used the word culturalizing beyond localization for kind of transitioning to kind of the Asia market. So if you look at if you're looking at genres of games and ones that may not be necessarily tied to language, for example, or not very text or language heavy, are there certain genres that transition better into Asian markets without kind of the heavy localization effort that's necessary?
From what I've seen is that the games that are more skill-based versus more of MMO type, they are more transferable. So, does that answer your question?
Well, I mean, I guess if you could take that to like a deeper level.
Yeah, I think in general, casual titles is easier to transition. Some examples are Fruit Ninja. Fruit Ninja is doing very well in China. Temple Run dolls that we publish. Where's My Water? So these casual titles that doesn't have a strong culture background is the most easy and we typically give the best ROI.
Okay, well, thank you very much for my illustrious panel. We're going to contact there. Let's give a round of applause.
We have a booth on the exhibition floor. Welcome to stop by. It's by the entrance. Thanks.
Can I